Hello, and welcome to week 4 of The Problem of Jesus. I'm Ethan, and I'm glad to be with you today as we consider what for many of us is sort of obviously a problem. Today we're talking about Jesus' miracles. And for some people, I don't have to tell you why this is a problem. You already think it's a problem. Lots of people today just sort of assume they definitely didn't happen, right? That miracles can't happen. This view is called naturalism, that the laws of nature can never be broken. And yet, at the heart of the Christian testimony is this belief that there is a God who is over nature, who created nature, and that the laws of nature exist at his command, and therefore are his to break. So we're asking some questions today about the miracles of Jesus. At the simplest level, we're asking the question, could they be true? Could Jesus really have done these deeds of power that were somehow signs of who he was? Secondly, we're asking, what was their purpose? Why the miracles? Was it just so there'd be one less sick person, or was there something more? And third, I wonder, what can we learn from Christ's miracles about God and us today and how God is at work in the world? The first question is the most basic. Could they be true? And some of you listening to me have already decided you know the answer is no. That's just not how the world works. But I think there's good reason to interrogate that conclusion. I think they might be true. When we talk about the record of the witnesses to Jesus' miracles, many of the things we said about the reliability of Scripture apply here as well. We have multiple eyewitnesses, again, not just one person telling the story, but many people telling the story. Many scholars notice how unembellished the miracle stories of Jesus are. They don't read like kind of the deeds of power of other great heroes of the ancient world. There's this one story where Jesus had to sort of try twice to heal a guy. It's as if they aren't exaggerating, but just telling us what they remember. One example of this non-embellishment is that for many of the miracle stories, the miracle isn't even the main point of the story. I mean, it's a miracle story, but it's a story about what you're allowed to do on the Sabbath, or who can forgive sin, or who really is the Son of God. It's about something else, and the miracle story is just sort of part of the story, remembered by those who focus our attention somewhere else. I will say that for me personally, one of the main reasons I think the miracle stories represent the memory of the church rather than the made up of the church is because of how the various tellings of the miracles of Jesus sometimes have small disagreements. Not in the main point, but in the little details. Those small disagreements only exist if these are the genuine memories of different people in different places. If this were a concocted tale, they would get all the facts straight. They would not allow those subtle differences to exist. In short, the miracle stories bear the mark of legitimate memory, rather than the mark of later fable that developed or made up stories to somehow prove a theological point. And so if the miracles happened, if they really are the memory of the eyewitnesses, then we're on to our second question. What was their purpose? Why the miracles? And again, we might think, well, it's obvious, right? Jesus healed people so they would be healthy. Except he didn't actually heal that many people. Sometimes he would only heal one or two people, and then he would move on before the crowds developed. It's actually pretty clear from the gospel stories that the purpose of the miracles wasn't their direct accomplishment, that their purpose was something else. The gospel writer John uses a word to remind us of this truth. He calls the miracles signs. I like to imagine that, you're on vacation with your family and you're driving by the highway and you see a sign for some attraction or some amusement park and you say to your kids, doesn't that look great? And they're like, oh yeah, that's amazing. Let's go there. So you drive over to the sign and park under it. And you're like, here we are, kids. We came to the sign just like you asked. But that's not what they meant. When they said, let's go there, they meant, let's go where the sign points. Let's go to what the sign is about. And so when we see the miracles, and we see John call them signs, we sort of need to ask that question. Signs of what? Signs that point where? And it's pretty clear that for the early Christians, these signs pointed in two directions. They pointed to God and Jesus, and they pointed to God's ultimate purpose. The signs demonstrate who Jesus is, his divinity, his authority, his teaching, his majesty, his glory. And these signs demonstrate the character of God. That God does not desire us to suffer. God does not desire us to be cut off. God does not desire us to be alone. God is opposed to death. They demonstrate God's character. But the signs also point to God's purpose. They tell us what God is up to. The signs tell us not just what God is doing now, but what God is going to do in the end. They're sort of like a little appetizer of the feast that is to come. When we see miracles of wholeness and transformation and healing, we get this glimpse that, oh, right, that is what God desires for the world. That's where this whole story is headed, to wholeness and healing and transformation. Every time we have a miracle encounter, it's a little moment where that prayer of Jesus comes true. Remember that place he prayed, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And every one of these miracle stories are little moments where that happens, where God's kingdom comes. God's will is done on earth as it is in heaven. And these moments of the kingdom coming and the will being done, they point forward to the moment when God's kingdom will come completely. God's kingdom will be firmly established and God's will be never ending. The moments show us what God is doing now, and they point forward to what God will do permanently, ultimately, and forever in the future. All right, Janet told me to say this, so I better get it right. She told me to say, miracles are signposts that point us toward a vision of God and a vision of the world as it should be. Miracles are both revelation, they help us see God, and restoration, the beginning of God's work in the present moment that is a foretaste of God's work in eternity. All right, that's their purpose. Last thing, what about today? What does learning about Jesus' miracles teach us about God today, about miracles today, about the miraculous, about God at work in the world? Well, I think a lot. Maybe it'll give you some encouragement and confidence. First of all, just recognize the miraculous is any time God interrupts the decay and chaos of our world with wholeness and peace in its place. Anytime that God's purpose of wholeness and peace interrupts chaos and decay, we're a witness to the miraculous. I mean, this is obvious when we see a healing that no one expected. But it's also true when we see wisdom emerge in a situation where foolishness was ruling. When we see freedom emerge in a life where addiction seemed to have control. When we see forgiveness and reconciliation happen in a relationship where presently there is estrangement and bitterness. All of these are places where God's purposes of wholeness and healing sort of break through and interrupt our world where chaos and decay seem to rule. These are the everyday miracles that prove that God is still working in the present moment and God will work in eternity to finish the work of establishing his kingdom, his will, on earth as it is in heaven. And so I would want to challenge you. In the same way that the early church testified to the miracles of God through Jesus Christ, I wish that we would. Don't underestimate the blessing it would be if you would testify to where you see God at work in your life. Maybe it's a physical healing, or maybe it's an experience of forgiveness. Maybe it's peace in a chaotic time and you don't know where the peace came from. It's just suddenly you were calm and you didn't see it coming and you're like, it felt like God just peeled back the chaos for a second. It felt like a signpost pointing me forward into eternity to what God is going to do in eternity, and in a little bit of it, God did right now. Your testimony is a reminder that miracles always point us to who God is in the present moment and what God will do in eternity. That's why miracles are always connected to hope. I want to mention a little bit, before I'm done, one of the difficulties of talking about miracles. It's hard to talk about miracles because all of us recognize all the times that it seems like we didn't get one. We prayed for one, we wanted one, the miracle we hoped for didn't come. Let's remember that happened in Jesus' day too. You know, the Bible tells us about the people he healed, but of course, most of the people that were sick in Jesus' day, he didn't heal. It's not like he organized some efficient miracle strategy by which everybody got their favorite miracle. No, he went to a village and he would heal some people and then he would move on. But remember, miracles aren't just about the moment, right? When my kids say, ooh, let's go there, they didn't mean let's go to the sign. They meant let's go to what the sign points to. Miracles are signs for who Jesus is and what he will accomplish. So in my life, in my life, when a miracle of healing doesn't happen, I know that just means it hasn't happened yet. When a miracle of restoration doesn't happen, I know that just means it hasn't happened yet. Because the miracles we see today are a signpost for what God will ultimately do in eternity. And God is faithful, and God will finish the work. I better say that thing Janet told me to say one more time, just so I don't get in trouble. Here's what she said. Miracles are signposts that point us toward a vision of God and a vision of the world as it should be. Miracles are both revelation and restoration, occurring in the present moment so that we might give glory to God and trust our God more deeply for the work that will be finished in eternity. They point to God today and the finished work tomorrow. I hope you have great discussions in your group. You're going to look at several miracle texts and you'll see how they both point to God's character and to God's purpose. And I hope that you are encouraged and strengthened by that conversation. Be blessed and have a great study.